Welcome back to session 4.3 of Sociology and Food. So now we'll be going through Central and Eastern Europe. So these include Germany, Poland, Bulgaria, as you can see on the map there, these highlighted areas. So the regional variations are minor and the exceptions are the foods of the southern CIS nations. So the traditional ingredients were dictated to what could be grown in the cold, often the damp climates. So the CIS is actually the Commonwealth of Independent Nations, such as Armenia, The foods are actually often dried, pickled or fermented for preservation. So the preservation methods include cucumber pickles, sour cream and sauerkraut. So here you've got some little groups. You've got milk or milk products, so the dairy are fresh or fermented and frequently consumed. Sour cream and whipped cream are popular in some regions, and the milk is fresh and also fermented. It's a pretty good little key here to actually look at quickly what's important in Central and Eastern Europe. All the way down the bottom, and the fruits and the vegetables there as well. Got broccoli, Brussels sprouts, apples, which are the common ones, and cereals, grains. You've got barley, rye, millet and corn. And the meat and poultry, you've got sausage and a variety of meats. Seasonings, you've got vinegar, paprika, allspice and thyme are popular ones, and this is a really good sort of column to look at in terms of remembering what key cultures in terms of their flavours, and I find that's a really good way of remembering what's in that culture and what's going on. Nuts and seeds, poppy seeds and sunflower seeds are quite popular. And then you've got coffee as a very popular beverage, and also flavoured drinking tea. So Russia. So foods are definitely designed to keep warm. So they are carbohydrate and fat rich, and fresh fruits and vegetables are rare. So definitely potatoes, bread, eggs, meat, lard, butter, top components of Russian meals there. So they need to give as much energy and warmth to survive the warmer winter time. So the essential components of Russian cuisine are the ones which provide more carbohydrates and fat than other proteins. So other popular foods are cabbage, milk, sour cream, curds, mushrooms, lard, cucumbers, tomatoes, apples, berries, honey, sugar, salt, garlic and onions. And bread is a staple, and one family alone consume up to 3 loaves per day. And as to rye bread, Russians eat more of it than any other nation in the world. Very interesting. So as the saying goes, no dinner without bread. So the traditional cooking relied on a pech or an oven, which occupied a central spot in the main room of the house. So rather than a burner as a heat source, they often used the oven, which had 2 compartments, one for slow cooking and one for quick baking. Also heated the homes of the peasants and therefore occupied a central spot in the main room of the house, like we said. So traditional dishes that they used to make in there was roasted meats, vegetables, soups and stews. And as we said before, rye or dark bread is a staple. So there you go, that's the pech. That's the central oven in the houses. Very interesting pictures there. Beautiful. Very beautiful. So some common foods here. We've got bliney, thin pancakes, pierogi, which is large pies, and the small pies. So you've got a small pie there on your right, you can see. Chai, which is a hot sweetened tea, and most of us know what a chai is, and we've had chai before. Roasted meats, vegetables, soups and stews. So there's some common ones to remember there. So bliney is a traditional Russian dish that's eaten in great quantity during the butter week, which is the Russian equivalent of Mardi Gras. So the last week before Lent, good bliney must be very thin, the thinner the better, and bliney must be served with sweet or savoury filling or with butter, sour cream, caviar, fresh fruit or smoked fish. That's a staple as well. And pies are usually filled with fish, cheese, jam, cabbage, mushrooms, chopped hard cooked eggs or meat, and the possibilities are unlimited. These pies are served alone or with soup at lunch. And hot and sweetened tea, which is chai, it's served from a large brass boiler and heats water and steeps the tea leaves to form a concentrated mixture. So that's a little bit more info on the chai there. So on to Germany. Also has a variety of regional cuisines and influences coming from the countries that have surrounded it or that surround it now. The traditional cuisine in the northwest of Germany was influenced by Belgian, with the east shows Polish influences, and the regions close to the Czech border influences of Czech cuisine can be found. So many Bavarian dishes are also similar to dishes commonly consumed in Austria. So we've got some regional influences including southwest, plenty of white bread, noodles, in the Baltic Sea, the potatoes, spices and seasonings. We've got fish, popular along the Baltic and North Sea. In Bavaria, traditional cuisine rich in pork and other meat products. And although region differences, they seem to be less obvious in the eating habits of Germans today. So those who have been to Germany, I've been to a few different places in Germany. It's still very defined in culture in terms of the food that they eat. But you can find a wide variety of food there, definitely. So we've got the most popular country in the Union with more than 80 million inhabitants, which is Germany. The German territory has not always been one single country, but for many centuries consisted of numerous small units, petty kingdoms, cities, countries, and dioceses. Thus, not surprising that there is no such thing as a German cuisine. So less than 3% of Germans are farmers, and the country must import much of the food: apples, pears, cherries, peaches, as well as grapes for wine production, and they're important crops in Germany. And the traditional cuisine of the southwest include plenty of white bread and noodles, whereas many traditional dishes of the Baltic Sea coast include potatoes and a variety of spices and seasoning, like we talked about just then. So after World War I, food was very scarce. And the soldiers trying to get home, they were starving. So after World War II, the country had even less food, but the nations that it defeated, Germany, helped to feed the Germans and rebuild the country, so they were a little bit luckier there. In 1949, after the World War II, Germany was divided into East and West, and that caused two halves to develop different styles of cooking that we'll notice now. So East Germany, closely associated with its neighbour Russia, took on more Russian style of cooking, and West Germany continued the more traditional style of German cooking, German cuisine. Now, meat is a common inclusion, particularly sausages. Definitely sausages are a big one when you go there. They are considered German fast food, so there are stands everywhere with sausages, you'll notice. Pumpernickel bread is definitely another one, and you will find that in our supermarkets now in the German section. And very nice if no one's tried it before. Very yummy, very dark, very rich and moist bread. And that is a rye bread itself. So also here we've got apple desserts, apple cake, apple pancakes, apple strudel, very common. Organ meats are also consumed frequently. And the pumpernickel bread itself, it was baked in the North Rhine-Westphalia region. So that's where it's actually been baked. And yes, it is very aromatic. It does smell beautiful. So the UK, the United Kingdom. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the food in the UK, Britain, London, Scotland, all the way through. So again, we've got a colder climate, so you can imagine what the food is like. Very, very fast foodie, very populated also, and as we go through, we'll notice the types of food that's are coming out in comparison to the more traditional cuisine that we've seen coming through the rest of the European countries we've just talked about. A little bit different, so we'll have a little look. So moving on. The countries of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, so there we've got England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the influence of France on food habits of Great Britain and Ireland and vice versa has led to many similarities in the cuisine of these countries. So English cuisine was primarily shaped during the Victorian era. So the religion, we've got Catholicism, Protestantism are the dominant religions there of the region. And also the diet was traditionally high in protein, so lots of meat or poultry or fish and a small side dishes of vegetables and starch. So it seems to be quite common to what we have today in Australia. I think the traditional meal of meat and 3 veg, I think that is quite common and in line with what they had in Britain. So low in whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and meat and potatoes and meat and 3 veg, like I said. So they are the second largest per capita tea consumers in the world. Love tea, English tea. Each person consuming on average 2.1 kilos of tea per year. So it was first introduced in Britain by the Portuguese Catherine of Braganza, the Queen Consort of Charles II of England. So the adding of milk to tea was to counteract the delicate china cups from cracking from the boiling water and soon became a preference. So that's very interesting. So the popularity of tea dates back to the 19th century when India was part of the British Empire and British interest controlled tea production in the subcontinent. So afternoon tea, traditionally a 4 o'clock time. It was introduced in England by Anna. It was the 7th Duchess of Bedford in the year 1840. It was a selection of dainty sandwiches and scones and cream. So as you know, if you go on holidays or if you go to a tea house, they'll have the afternoon tea typically as cakes and scones and with a yummy selection of teas there. The tea was grown in India, or the sea lion is poured from silver teapots into delicate bone china cups, and therefore the milk was then poured on top to stop them cracking. So a little bit of tradition, a little bit of interest here. The Duchess actually got hungry around the 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so that's why it was tea in her household was served traditionally late at about 8 o'clock. So it was a long period of time between lunch and dinner. So she asked always for a tray of tea, bread and butter. So the Earl of Sandwich also had the same idea of putting a filling between the 2 slices of bread and the cake. So they were brought to her room in the late afternoon, and this habit became of hers as she began inviting friends to join her for the afternoon tea. So the high tea. So high tea, meat tea, is an early evening meal eaten between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. High tea typically consisted of hot dishes such as fish and chips or shepherd's pie, followed by cakes and bread and butter and jam. Yum. Occasionally there would be cold cuts of meat such as ham, and traditionally high tea was eaten by middle to upper class children whose parents would have a more formal dinner later, or by labourers, miners and the like when they came home from work. So the term was first used around 1825. The history here. And high is used in the same sense of well advanced, like high noon, for example, to signify that it was taken later in the day. So not high as in Duchess high. Royalty high. So the term high tea was used as a way to distinguish it from afternoon tea, and it stated that the words low and high referred to the tables from which either meal was eaten. So the pub is quite central, and anyone who goes to England, anywhere in England, will notice that there is a pub everywhere, and the names of the pubs are actually quite different in themselves, and very funny as well if you actually look at some of the names of all the pubs. They serve quite similar style foods and beers and ales, obviously also the alcohol, and the common pub meal serves lots of the ploughman's lunch there, lots of chunks of cheese, hunk of homemade bread, pickled onion and ale. And then other meals that you get there are the shepherd's pies, the pastries, and also a lot of chips is served. We all know what typical pub food is. Lamb shanks, and these days a lot of hot pots and stews also, and steaks. So fish and chips is actually, no, just going back. The pub, I just wanted to, the pub, the name is short for public house, and it's a central part of life in the United Kingdom. So it has over 61,000 pubs, Britain. They're cosy, homely, and they are famous for their beers. So when you actually walk into a pub, they are very homely, very cosy, and especially when it's really cold outside, it's so warm and so lovely to walk in and have a beautiful meal and a nice beer or a coffee or a tea. So they are very popular all over Britain. So fish and chips are again a very defining feature of the English food. Until the middle of the 16th century, eating meat on a Friday was punishable by hanging, so leading to the national habit of eating fish on this day. So fish and chips was generally served on the Friday. The fish is battered and deep fried and served with fried potatoes and seasoned with salt and malt vinegar. And again, I think it's another one of those foods that we've taken as a traditional food here in Australia as well. So one unusual vegetable of this region is laver seaweed, and a specialty in Wales and parts of northern coastal England, and prepared and known as laver bread. That's very, very different. So the fish and chips, there's 8,500 fish and chip shops across the United Kingdom, and they outnumber McDonald's 8-1. Isn't that amazing? So laver, a little bit of a note on laver. It's a purple seaweed called nori in Japan. So it's customarily boiled into a gelatinous paste and then mixed with oatmeal and formed into patties that are fried, known as laver bread. So that was what we were talking about before. Okay, now on to Scotland. So there's just a bit of an information, or a bit of pictures there. We've got some afternoon tea. Typical ploughman's or sandwich and big chunks of cheese, and then fish and chips. So Scottish food was heavily influenced by the arrival of the Vikings in the 9th century. Not 19th, sorry. With them, they brought different cooking methods such as smoking and the breed of cattle, now as the Angus, which is the Aberdeen Angus. Now, anyone who's been to Scotland, it's very cold. So you'll notice a lot of the food there is obviously very suited to the cold climate. So we'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute. So there's been also influences from the French, who had a close alliance with Scotland, and particularly around 16th century, when Marie de Guise, the Lorraine, married the King of Scotland, James V, and brought French chefs and their cuisine to the Scottish court. So after reading slides for a little bit, I get sometimes it's you see something, so apologies for the V, not the 5. So oats and barley remain the staple crop for working man's food in Scotland. So porridge is very popular in Scotland. It's a very, very yummy food when you actually have it prepared traditionally or in a restaurant or in a bed and breakfast, for example. They are very, very yummy. Game also was such as rabbit, deer, woodcock and grouse, as well as fish from the lochs, streams and abundant coastlines. They are definitely featured quite readily. Game, so just onto the whiskey and the cheeses. Whiskey is good. It warms you up, definitely, when you are there. If anyone's been there, beautiful whiskey, and they flavour it just amazingly. So it's a great contribution to the fame of Scotland. They do produce some fine whiskey. It's also known that the ancient Celts practiced distilling, and the liquid they produce, known as the ancient Gaelic as usage beatha, water of life, evolved into a Scottish whiskey. And again, apologies for any pronunciation errors. Scottish whiskey is regarded as the whiskey and prized among connoisseurs with its variety of aromas and flavours. So they do have such a good variety of flavours. Honey whiskey, oh, beautiful. Yum. And the cheeses. So haggis, a definite one that we can align with Scottish food tradition. Made from sheep's offal, and it's definitely the best known Scottish delicacy. It's prepared by boiling, then mincing the windpipe, lungs, heart and liver of the sheep, and then combining it with its beef, suet, onion and oatmeal. So it is actually quite tasty when I tasted it a long time ago. I wouldn't probably have it these days, but it was very tasty. The way they actually flavoured it, you wouldn't know any different. The mixture is actually placed inside a sheep's stomach, which is then sewn shut and boiled for 3 hours. Suet is, beef suet, just on a little bit of a note there, it's a raw beef or mutton fat, especially the hard fat found around the loins and kidneys. And it's traditionally served with mashed potato and turnips. So just a bit more information there for you. So you've got some haggis there. The Grinner's breakfast. And when you go to Scotland and stay in a bed and breakfast, it's traditionally, they always have this on the meal, and even in a pub, they will have that as part of the meal, haggis and black pudding. So haggis on the left, it's quite peppery and grainy. On the right, black pudding, Scottish sausage, baked beans and toast. So we've got some other traditional diets, or dishes, sorry. Scottish salmon is very, very popular. Tends to be smoked, thinly sliced and served as an entree. We've got crowdy, also another traditional dish. Simple white cheese made from the whey of slightly soured milk, seasoned with salt and a touch of pepper. And the seasoned whey is squeezed in a muslin bag to remove excess water. Left aside for 2 days and then rolled in oats and served. Also Scotch broth or hotchpotch. A rich stock is traditionally made by boiling mutton. The neck is best, apparently. And beef, marrow, bone or chicken. For a chicken broth, there is also freedom over the choice of vegetables, which should be diced. So you've got carrots and garden peas, leeks, cabbage, turnips and a stick of celery can all be used. And the hard vegetables should be added first to the boiling stock, and a handful of barley with the softer vegetables being added later. Then the final consistency should be thick and served piping hot. As piping hot as it could be. And as it needed to be because it's so cold. So Wales is beautiful. I just remember rolling hills and very, very green, and yeah, such a beautiful country, such a beautiful area. The cuisine is the same as Scotland and Britain, however there are a few specialties. Leek, which is the national emblem, features in numerous dishes, and fish, seafood and potato, they're all dietary staples there. So leek, St David is the patron saint of Wales, and leek is worn on St David's Day. So March 1 is a national holiday. And the potato is a dietary staple. Fish and seafood are definitely abundant, especially the trout and the salmon. And also the Glamorgan sausage, it actually contains cheese, leeks and breadcrumbs, so it's actually meatless. So Ireland. So Anglo-Normans in Ireland in 1169 affected both farming and diet in Ireland. So the Normans came from the Normandy region of France in 1066. So wheat, peas, beans became staple foods of the people, and they began preparing more elaborate dishes. The food customs were also changing, and the French and Italian cooking custom influenced upper class cuisine. So the strong black tea with milk and sugar is served with all meals, and lunch being the main meal of the day, eaten at home with the whole entire family. Whiskey is also very popular, also with the distillers. Breakfast is a large meal, usually consisting of oatmeal porridge, eggs, bacon, black pudding, homemade bread, butter and preserves. And again, the tea would be served with that. And lunch is a hearty soup, followed by meat, potatoes, vegetables, bread and dessert. And afternoon tea is still common. So light supper is served later in the evening, and Irish pubs are known throughout the world for their vibrant and friendly atmosphere. Unfortunately, alcoholism is high, especially among the Irish. Just a little note there. So milk, cheese, Meat, cereals and some vegetables formed the main part of the Irish diet before the potato, which was introduced in the 17th century. And the first Europeans to use the potato as a staple food, and it was responsible for significant population growth as well as famines. So it's still a staple among the root vegetables such as carrot, turnips and onions. So the potato, more than anything else, contributed to the population's growth, which had less than 1 million inhabitants in the 1590s, but had 8.2 million in 1840. That's a huge growth. However, the dependency on the potato eventually led to 2 major famines and a series of other smaller famines. So with the introduction of the potato, a plentiful and cheap food source, the population increased greatly especially among the poor or displaced. So a family with 10 acres and 4 sons divided the land up to 4 equal parts. When these sons had children, the 2.5 acres were again divided up, making the land unproductive and overworking with continuous seeding and harvesting. So it then led families having no productive land and with all yields falling and disease striking the crops. So unfortunately that was a little bit hard on them. So no other nation in the world had their cuisine changed so drastically as the Irish, with the possible exception of the effect of the tomato on southern European culture. Some interesting points there. So it grows in poor soil, however, where nothing else would allow population of Ireland to increase to more than it would have on any other food. They were usually eaten or broiled in their skins. And prior to the 1940s, potato blight, an adult male would eat 13 to 14 potatoes every day. Very little with very little ease. So mashed potatoes were invented by using some of the potato water from the pot with salt, mustard, and sometimes buttermilk. So again, another popular dish now. So 1840s, it was a potato blight turned the leaves and stems on the plants black, and also rotted the roots and killing the potatoes. So as a solution, corn was imported from America. But these Irish mills used to process softer grain failed, and there was no corn, so the corn was then left to rot. So around 1 million died during the potato famine of the Irish. And over 1 million more decided to start over in America, where the food was more abundant. So some more samples of the traditional Irish dishes here. Irish stew is the national dish. Soda bread made with baking soda instead of yeast, prepared each day to accompany meals and still remains popular in contemporary times. The Irish value hospitality and generous portions of food are common at home in restaurants. Traditionally, the Irish stew would be cooked for hours over an open fire. It is similar to the Lancashire hotspot of England and in the Scotch broth of Scotland. That is definitely the national dish there. So the Irish value hospitality, as I said, and the very generous portions of food. So when I was in Ireland, definitely ate a lot, maybe too much, and just beautiful stews is what I remember. So in a bit of a summary there, we're finished going through the slides now. So would I recommend you actually going through and having a look, and actually even just doing a quick summary table. It's really good to put through some influences. So particular area, the particular foods that have an influence, and any religion that has a particular influence. And then another column just for key points or key things that you need to remember. So having a little table there, or a little a small line of a few points will help you to remember for revision for later purposes. So what in defining the European and British culture, these tables can really help, and the food practices of these populations can also really help. So looking at the English, the Irish, the French, the Greek, and what is different between each of those. So that's a really good summarising activity, I find. The Mediterranean culture is a really good one, like I said earlier, to then have a look through and actually see how it has and what you can do and use with your clients now. And and seeing what points you'd like to gather out of that, and actually looking at further research as well. So thank you very, very much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions also, and please ask your lecturer any questions that you may have, and all the best. See you soon.